Well, welcome. Ron, happy Wednesday to you. It's not Thursday. We're doing this on Wednesday for a good reason. Happy hour. Cheers to you, sir.
Cheers to everybody. Cheers to you, McKenna,
Yeah.
everybody. Happy Thanksgiving Eve.
Uh, you stole it from me. I was about to say the same thing.
Well, you took
Well,
too long.
welcome. If you're joining us live or if you're watching this later, it is the day before Thanksgiving. We've got three big chunky topics that we're gonna spend about 7 or 8 minutes on each, and then we've got, I believe, four little rapid fire topics that we're gonna get to at the end. But before we get to all of that, I've got a from the gut little section where I'm going to go round two on Cracker Barrel. I've got some further thoughts. If you've had your head in the sand for a few months back in August, then you didn't hear about Cracker Barrel, but there's some new stuff going on with it that I'm going to comment on. And then we'll get to our main topic. So, again, thanks for joining us. It is the day before Thanksgiving. Our first topic is what, Ron?
The average age of the first time home buyer, we're going to not only look at that data, which is controversial, but we're going to look at some other very surprising, counterintuitive data about how generationally Gen Zers and millennials are traveling compared to the previous generations. It's really interesting.
Yep. And then our second main topic is
Yeah, this comes from Experian. They surveyed a bunch of home buyers and what U.S. renters, what's their expectation of when they're going to be able to buy a home.
yep. And lastly,
The U.S. housing supply, um, U.S. housing supply. David, I don't have no. I'm drawing a blank. I have no idea.
the outlook for U.S. housing supply and affordability. No?
No, still nothing. I'll figure it out by the time we get there.
We'll get there. I've got a
Yeah.
cat on my lap. He'll probably join the show at any moment. He's if I wonder if you can hear him purr. Can you hear my cat purring, Ron?
No, no, I
I'm
can't.
gonna I'm gonna make him say hi real quick. So here's Duncan. All right.
Hey,
So
Duncan.
let's get to from the gut. I'm gonna start talking about my recent thoughts on Cracker Barrel. All right. So, like I said, back in August, I talked about the topic of rebranding, how to do it right, how it can be done wrong. And I used Cracker Barrel among a couple others as an example of the latter, how to do it wrong. And I'd like to revisit that with a slightly different angle. Last week, their CEO, Julie Messino, sat down with Glenn Beck last week, and they did it. It was her first public interview, at length interview since everything went crazy for them. Shit really hit the fan for Cracker Barrel after she went on Good Morning America in August and showcased their new logo, their 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 overhaul on their interior design, their menu, and more. There was a question at the end of the interview with Glenn Beck and her that made me kind of lean forward in my chair. Glenn looked at the CEO and said, "This is probably unfair to ask you, but were you surprised you weren't fired?" She paused and she said, "I feel like I've been fired by America." And that line just kind of sat there in the air. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. They didn't run it through a focus group, or at least that was my opinion. It seemed very genuine. You could see it in her eyes. Excuse me. It wasn't a talking point. It was a human being processing the weight of a very public failure. We live in a moment where everything feels loaded. Politics, values, identity, all mixed into the way people read a logo or a tagline or a store remodel. So, what happened? People didn't just say, I like the old logo better. They kind of treated it like an act of betrayal. Like the company had walked into grandma's house and started throwing away furniture. And Julie Messino, the CEO, she ended up sitting in a Cracker Barrel on camera answering these honest questions for all of it. And here's what I appreciated about how she handled it. She didn't pretend that they nailed it. She didn't say, "We stand by our decision." She said things like, "We messed up. We lost sight of the foundation. We didn't realize how much people saw themselves in the logo." She talked about she did talk about the years of declining service and complexities within their kitchen and staffing issues and losing long tenured employees. And she owned the fact that the logo was the straw that broke the camel's back. And when she was asked about being fired, she didn't deflect, she didn't laugh it off, she didn't make light of it. She said that she feels like she's been fired by America. As someone who's led creative teams and built brands and been in the position to make big calls that not everyone loved, I felt that. But Cracker Barrel misread a cultural moment. They underestimated how attached people were to the imagery and the environment and the feeling of the brand and the nostalgia around it. But I was also thinking that the public significantly overreacted. We're talking about the design choices and remodels at a restaurant. Important, maybe. Emotional, yes. But the intensity of the outrage felt a little unhinged. And I'll admit that I was a little bit guilty of it as well myself. But two things can be true at the same time. Cracker Barrel, they made real mistakes, and we live in a world that is way too eager to light those people on fire immediately. I think about a much smaller version of this in my own life. When I rebranded back in 2012, when I rebranded Movement Mortgage or New American Mortgage to Movement Mortgage, the reaction internally was rough, especially with the employees and especially the loan officers. They hated it at first. To them, it felt like I messed with something that didn't need to be touched. The old name and logo were part of their identity, and the old logo was part of their identity, and the new logo felt at the time strange and maybe unnecessary, and to some of them weird, in addition to the name, not just the logo, but the name. So I kind of got a taste of what it's like to be the face of a decision that people viscerally dislike. Where I would walk into rooms and I could feel the energy shift, and people are talking, they're just they were questioning my judgment. And here's what time did in that specific situation. They got over the initial reactions. They saw the strategy, they watched what the brand became, and years later, the brand was something people were proud of. Employees and other companies were trying to copy what we were doing at the time. Now, again, that doesn't mean that every backlash is wrong. In the Cracker Barrel case, a lot of the backlash was pointing to real issues: decline in experience, fear of losing tradition, concern that the brand was moving on from the people who built it. But it does mean something important about leadership in general, and especially leadership in public. We say we want leaders to admit when they're wrong, but when they do, we keep the punishment going anyway. So for me, hearing Julie say that she feels like she's been fired by America reminded me of this. When we talk about brands, it's easy to forget the people behind them. People making the best decisions they can, but maybe with incomplete information or maybe misguided strategy. But they're people trying to protect jobs, grow their companies, and adapt to a world that's different than it was 5 years ago, in a world that's moving fast. These people go home at night and carry the weight of sometimes thousands, 50,000, 70,000 employees, and their families of those people on their shoulders. They carry that. None of this excuses bad decisions, but it should shape the way we respond to them. If you're a leader, if you run a team, a branch, a company, or even just your own solo brand, here's what I hope you take from this. Number one, you're going to get some things wrong. Not hypothetically, not if you slip up. You'll make a call at some point that doesn't land. You'll change something that people love, or you'll misread a moment. The measure of your character will not be whether you avoided all of that, it'll be how you respond when it happens. Do you double down and pretend nothing's wrong, or do you hide behind PR language? And that's what I like about that interview with the Cracker Barrel CEO. She didn't do any of those things. Number two, don't let don't let the internet convince you that a chapter is the whole book. Feeling fired by America is real. I believe her when she says that. But the story of their brand or a career or a leader isn't written in one headline or one bad week. And number three, maybe we all need to relearn how to let people recover. We can hold we can hold leaders accountable without pretending that they're cartoon villains. We can be honest about what went wrong without rooting for them to lose their jobs or their future or their reputation. So watching that interview, I found myself thinking something that I don't often think when a big brand messes up. I thought at the time that I hope she wins. I hope they pull it off. It actually made me want to go to a Cracker Barrel. I haven't been there yet, but as of last Wednesday, Thursday night, whenever I saw it, I was like, I'm kind of now rooting for them. I kind of want to go back to a Cracker Barrel, and not because I'm emotionally attached to them, but because humility, honesty, and the willingness to sit in the hot seat and say, I got this wrong, is exactly what I want more of in leadership. Ron, any thoughts?
Dave, we talked about this earlier in the week, and I was completely memorized when you were telling me about the first time, and I'm equally memorized. I love listening to you talk about branding and leadership. I love hearing it. So that was fantastic, and what a really good way to present an idea. That
Yeah,
being
so it's
said,
kind of go ahead.
oh, go ahead. No. What I was gonna say, so I mean, it's hard not to align with what you're saying completely. And I think you're 100% right. But when the first Cracker Barrel controversy came out, the company is spiraling into irrelevance and has questionable viability. Do they have a role in America today? Do people want roadside fatty food for cheap? The answer is no. And then the CEO is tasked with trying to get them across the chasm of not being viable to becoming viable. They did a ton of research and thinking about where the consumer wants to go, and she led them there. And I actually thought it was the right decision. In the moment, I'm like, yeah, if you don't do this, your company is going to fall off a cliff and close in 10 years. And I was surprised by the back when you talked about this in August. I was super surprised about the backlash. I'm like, nobody goes there. Nobody likes the place. It's going bankrupt. Why are you guys complaining about something that's irrelevant? But you're right. It's the strangest things that the public, gloms onto, and that's important to them. You don't even know, right? You don't even know. Like we don't care enough about Cracker Barrel to actually go there until they make a change. We go, what? You don't have chicken fried steak anymore? Are you kidding me? So it's been fascinating. I love listening to your insights, David, because they're just so good.
Yeah, I think it was I decided I wanted to talk about this over the weekend, maybe. And when I decided that I wanted to talk about it, the day after, my son texted me just out of the blue. He was like, "Hey, just I went to a Cracker Barrel last night, first time in 15 years, or maybe even 15 years or so." And he actually really enjoyed it. The one thing that he was not happy about is, the little triangular peg board little game that they
Mhm.
have on every table.
Yeah.
That's now digital.
Oh,
But he
interesting.
said, yeah, he said it was good food, it was, good price, and he actually enjoyed it, and he plans on going back, so, yeah.
Yeah, as I listen to you tell that story, I can tell you I'm not, a mature enough leader to be able to say, "Gosh, it's all my fault. We screwed this up," when I'm right. Like that, like that's not a skill set I have. Like I still have to grow into that skill set. That's why I'm so impressed. Uh, with how you describe that, David, because she has a ton of humility and owns the space between the spaces that may or
Hmm.
maybe not even exist, but that are necessary, so kudos to her.
Yeah, I I don't mean to pat myself on the back, but the biggest example that I have in my career is, and I won't mention any names, but I was told by my boss to fire someone because of a mistake they made, but I knew the backstory of it, and I was slightly to blame for the issue as well. And I told him no. I said, "You'll have to fire me before I fire that guy because I was a little part of the problem, but not a big part of the problem." And I was like, "Absolutely not. You got to stand up for your people and stand up for what's right and lead with that kind of humility." And that's what really hit home for me with that interview. But we're way behind. I say we move on to our first main topic. What say you?
That's great. Yeah, let's do
Okay,
it.
so yeah, so NAR median first time home buyer was, take it away, Ron.
Yeah, David, we talked about this last week, and we're not going to rehash stuff we talked about last week. But NAR came out with a very well publicized survey saying the average first-time home buyer is now 40 years old. In my rant last week, I said that no number is completely bogus, and we discussed it why it's bogus. And there's a competing number that from the Federal Reserve Bank in New York that actually tracks real data, not some weird survey. And their number, which has been very consistent over decades, places the first-time home buyer at 36 years old, which is, I think, the next slide actually shows us as we go to it. Uh, yeah, so this is NAR. Okay, this is a great slide. This is NAR. This is what they're saying is the average age of first-time home buyers, as well as all home buyers and repeat buyers, whether it's 62 years old for the repeat buyers or the average age for all buyers. I think that number is 56, or first-time home buyers is 40. And like that's what the press runs with. And what this comes from is they send out like a gazillion surveys. I think it's like 120,000 surveys or something. They get 6,000 back, but the problem is the survey is so long. There's so many questions on the survey that nobody can answer every question. And even if you had the the wherewithal to answer all questions, well, that probably is not going to be a good survey respondent. Like that's going to be a really specific person that's going to spend 2 hours responding to a survey from NAR. So this number, but if we look at the next slide, this is what's so good. Look how interesting this next slide is. This is the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, and what they're actually using credit data. And what they do is they call a first-time home buyer the first time they get a mortgage payment showing up on their credit report. So whether that's right or not right, I mean, it's consistent. I mean, they're using all credit data, all credit data in the United States, and so first time, the first time a mortgage hits your credit report, you're a first time home buyer, and you can see looking at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's data that the average first time home buyer is only 36 years old, and that number has been very consistent over the last 2 decades. Not only has it been consistent, but it's actually dropped in the last 20 years. It's now a year. The average first time home buyer is now, based on the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, the average age is 1 year younger than 20 years ago. But that's not the narrative that the media likes. The narrative, like they want, to sensationalize it. Oh my God, the world's falling. The economy is horrible. Things are horrible. People can't buy a house. It's all bad. And so NAR contrives data that the media likes to, regurgitate and quote, but actually using real data from real life things, like not somebody's survey and from who knows, they spent 2 hours answering a survey, right? It's so interesting. And so David, we talked about this last week, and we have much better data coming up in the next couple slides. But David, I know you find this surprising because it's not what the media says, is it?
Yeah, my question, I just thought of this. How would this, Ron, you've been a leader of a lot of loan officers in the past. How should this change the way a loan officer does business compared to 10 years ago? Not from last year, because it changes incrementally, but should this change the way a loan officer does business?
You know what, David, it's such a good question. And the best way I can answer this is we're in the midst of a giant vibe recession, which has very little, anchor in reality, right? By and large, people are better off. Like this generation, the youngest generation is richer than their parents were at the same age. They're richer than their grandparents were at the same age. Like with this five recession, that's not reality. It's about feeling. And so that's what this is too, right? It's the feeling like I've been left behind, the feeling that I can't achieve it, right? And so how it impacts us, David, is we have to change our approach to the home buyer, and we have to become much more consultative. We have to get much better advisors. We have to get much more into the psychology of home buying to convince people that they can buy and it's the best thing for them. Because there's a flood of news telling them they can't do it. We have to pierce through that noise and show them the path to home ownership.
Yeah. How do you dig into this psychology of home buying? Where would someone even start?
There's so many components into it, David, because there's so many things that are barriers that people think they can afford a home. We've talked about it before. It doesn't matter whether it's spending $100 a month on streaming services, or $50 a month at Starbucks, or $400 a month at Uber Eats. It doesn't matter. All these expenses make affordability a challenge. Aside from things being
Yeah.
expensive, Mike, I'm not saying things aren't expensive, but if we can show them discipline, and if we can show them the why, like if we can have discipline and if we do the right things, you can get on the path to home ownerships. And homeowners have 40 times the wealth as renters, right? It's $400,000 versus 10,000. This is your future to financial freedom, so that you can get there faster to do whatever the heck you want to do in life after that, right? And we just need to have classes and outreach, and we just need to be busy on social media and busy in the media, because we got to just change the narrative and change this vibe. But let's
Yeah.
look at the
I think we
David, look at the next two things. So guys, I just argued that this NAR number is completely baloney, and you may or may not be believing us or me. Now I'm going to bend your mind more. Right now, this comes from an apartment list. I believe it's a study, and look at this. What this chart is: generational homeownership rate by age. So it shows, each generation, when do they achieve home ownership, right? If you look at this chart, the thing that jumps out at you, it hasn't really substantially changed, right? It hasn't changed. Gen Zers are achieving home ownership as soon as the previous generations, but that's not the narrative we hear. And I love this chart. It's okay. When do you generally achieve home ownership? And it tells you by age, and it tells each generation. It hasn't changed, not significantly. It simply hasn't changed. But that's not what we hear. And David, before I get your comments on this, let's go to the next chart. This is another mind-blowing one, because you will not believe this. This is a generational rate of living with parents. So, how many generations, how long do they live with their parents, right? Because right now the story is, the new generation, they all live at their parents' house. They all live at their parents' house. We didn't do that. We never lived at our parents' house. But if you see this chart by generation, it hasn't changed for 4 generations. Not at all. It hasn't changed. That's what's so crazy about this. Everything we think we know is true, everything the media is telling us, it's not true. And as mortgage and real estate professionals, we have to pierce through the noise and come with truth and help people go achieve the American dream, because that's the path to wealth in America for most people. Anyway, David, that was a mini rant. It wasn't supposed to be my rant, even though I ranted on this last week.
Yeah, I'm just curious how the headlines, well, there's nothing new there, but just how the headlines can not be backed up by data like we're seeing here. But that's true for any any headline, whatever the topic might be, whether it be politics or whatever. But how is that happening?
Well, we cling to the data that serves us best, and anybody can manipulate, data, right? There's
Yeah,
lies, damn lies, and statistics. I mean, so I get it, but we love that story. That's the thing. We have to pierce through that story, we have to pierce through to get to reality, because it's in the best interest of Americans to own a home to start building wealth.
yeah. Can you pull up that last chart, McKenna? So it starts at age 20, and by yeah, so somewhere between like 20 to 23. I'm surprised that doesn't go actually sooner to 18. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any
Interesting,
further
isn't it,
thoughts
though?
on that. It,
I thought it's
yeah,
I mean, it's so contrary to what we keep hearing, really contrary. And I just, it's really hard too. If you're, trying to advise people, like I think mortgage advisors are probably, not only some of the gifted people, but some of the people who carry the biggest burden. Like, how do you advise folks? How do you tell them, no, what you've heard isn't true, and let's really dissect this and let's figure out how and why you should own a home. And it's hard work. You can't do that. Can't do that part time. You can't do that. You can't mail that in. You got to get really good at giving that kind of consultation.
yeah. Let's talk about renters. Move on to the next one.
Yeah, let's do that. All right. So this is a really good topic. Here's the thing. The most important thing about this topic, more than nearly half of renters anticipate wanting to buy a home in the next 4 years. And that number goes up significantly when you say in the next 8 years. So something like 70% of renters want to own a home in the next 8 years. But in this, survey right here, where they said that barriers to home ownership, it's really surprising. McKenna, I don't know if we kept those bullet points in our presentation or not. For what they thought the barriers were. All right, that's great. And so, here's what they thought that to being able to own a home, if somebody could help them, financial support, parents help, that'd be fine, which is true today. But here's the thing: half of renters said if they could figure out how to buy a home, they would.
Wow.
Oh my gosh! Well, that's encouraging if I'm a real estate agent or a loan officer, right? And then another, 38%, I have no idea how a mortgage works. So half say I don't know how to buy a home. If somebody could, teach me, give me a roadmap, I'd probably get there. And then if somebody can tell me how I qualify for a mortgage, I'm all in. Right? These are the top three answers, by the way. So one, my parents give me money, understandable. Two, someone teach me how to buy a home. And three, somebody tell me how I get a mortgage. Like if I'm a mortgage or real estate professional, I'm running around the block naked, having a party going, "Ooh, I found my gold mine. I found my gold mine." All I have to do is tell people how to do it, and I got as many clients as I could possibly have. Right? I mean, how crazy is that? Like get down to the local, rec center and start doing home buyer seminars, right? Because people don't know. They're clamoring for it. It's like a flashing light. You're driving down the freeway, wealth and abundance for you here. If you just pull over and teach somebody how to buy a house, it's crazy. Anyway, sorry, David. Apparently,
Let's get
fired
a
up.
couple thoughts from McKenna. McKenna, what you're 23. What are some things that could potentially bring you anxiety when it comes to the time when you'll be in a position to buy a home? What kind of you probably haven't thought about it yet and you're not anxious about it, but just put yourself in that situation. What do you think would bring you most anxiety?
I have, and I am. I mean, I think the main thing to me that just seems so daunting about the idea of buying a home and going through that process is that I have no idea what that process is like. And I like to know about things. I like to look things up. I like to have a general understanding about things before I do them. I have no idea what the process looks like. I have no idea how long it takes. I have no idea what I have to do to qualify. And so for me, I think just the biggest anxiety inducing thing is not knowing.
Should we give her a pop
Yeah.
quiz, Ron?
I was going to do that, David. I was already on the way. McKenna, how much do you think you have to put down to buy a house?
Percentage wise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
10%?
Yeah. See, and McKenna, it's totally understandable. Something like, 60% of first-time home buyers think you have to put 20% down, which is completely false. You can put down as little as 3%. And in truth, there's ways to go 100%. And there's first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance that can actually pay, so zero down and pay your closing costs. But we just as an industry have done a really poor job, teaching people that. How about credit? What kind of credit do you think you need to be able to buy a house?
I have no idea what a normal credit score looks like. And so I have no idea. Pretty damn
Take a
good.
guess.
That's what I would say.
Pretty damn
Pretty
good.
Yeah.
And do
pretty
you know what
damn
your credit
good.
score is?
No.
Do you don't know what your credit score is? And do you
No.
know how credit scores are derived?
From credit cards.
See, this is so good. No, you're reflective of the general population, which is my passion. We have all these loan officers that can go out there and real estate agents that can educate your generation, and it's not your fault; it's our fault, right? And so to me, I mean, I get so excited about wanting to go do that, and I could keep asking you questions. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. It says there's very low financial literacy around homeownership or finances in general, and that's why, I love places like First Home IQ that teach financial literacy for first-time home buyers as well as other buyers, because there's such a gap. And I don't know where that gap came from, other than there's a lot of noise and misinformation. And something like, McKenna, something like 80% or 90% of your generation get most of their information from online, like from TikTok. Like they're going to teach you how to buy a house. Like, I don't think that's a good plan. But anyway,
I at least have the advantage of, I know whenever that time comes, I can call my good friend Ron Stowers and be like, help.
Hey, next time I'm there, as in this weekend, let's do a little bit of house planning.
Perfect.
Perfect.
Of course, you might need a raise. But
Alrighty. All right, let's move on to the topic that, Ron, you had no idea what it was about, but the outlook for U.S. housing supply and affordability.
I figured this out, by the way.
Okay.
And let's go to the first chart, and then I'm once again in my rant, so I'm sorry. Dave, this is why we cut. I used to do Ron's rant at the end, but then we figured out I just ranted the whole time. So why do that? That's like redundant. But here's what this, and this is from Goldman Sachs. It was actually a really good report from Goldman Sachs. But here's what Goldman Sachs said: housing supply growth has failed to keep pace with demand. Now, David, I have a couple of questions here. Okay. First, if we now have a record number of new homes unsold, highest level in decades, how do we have an inventory problem? And as we start to get to 6 years, 7-year highs with inventory levels on resale homes, how do we have an inventory problem?
Wait, what was the last part you said with inventory homes?
Well, no, with current homes, resale homes, we are now at like a 7-year high on inventory. How do we have exactly a inventory problem?
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question before you said that last statement, because what is the average cost of a new home versus the average cost of an existing home? Do you know?
The average cost of a
Sales
new
price,
home
I
is
should
cheaper
say.
now. It's cheaper than new homes are cheaper than resale, and it's around that
Yeah,
$420,000 mark nationally.
right, right.
Yeah.
So that doesn't add up at all.
Yeah. Well, see, but it's all data. You can manipulate data. Now, by the way, we do have a housing shortage. And the idea is that as population has grown, we haven't kept, adding new housing units as population has grown, right? But the thing that drives housing demand is housing formation. And so it's very hard to calculate, right? So,
Mm.
McKenna, when do you want to move out and buy your own home? Because you create a new housing formation or rent. That's what housing formation is. Like, I want to get the hell out of this house. I'm gonna get my own. I'm gonna get my, and the housing formation can be apartment or buying, right? That's what tells you whether we have inventory levels right. But the problem that gets so complicated with this is, well, my motive to create my own housing formation is, it is influenced by my ability to think I can do it, right? And so if more people thought they could do it, there'd be more demand. And that's why you go back to population numbers, not to housing formations. Because one of the things that we've totally misunderstood, and why, like for the longest time, the media said, oh, we're 5 million houses short for inventory, right? But oh my gosh, how come houses aren't moving if we're 5 million houses short? Well, because people are going, I'm gonna delay buying a house because they're freaking expensive. And so right now we don't have that demand, contrary to what all these models said, which is confusing economists. Now, what there is there's a massive shortage of affordable housing. That's what there is, a massive shortage of of affordable housing. That is entry level housing. McKenna, if you were to enter the market, you would certainly like to enter it to get into a nice little, maybe 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 3 bedroom, 2 bath for like $300,000 or $280,000. That doesn't exist where you live, not even probably in a condo, right? And so therefore you're going, I can't buy a house. I'm going to stay here. And so housing formations have been muted or have been retarded, slowed down, so that we're not getting that demand that we need. So I understand it's a really complex, but let's go to the other chart because there's some other interesting data here. That's the first one. Let's go. Okay, so
Are
this is
there
what this
any
says. So
builders, Ron? Are there any
what?
builders that are kind of leading the charge with building affordable housing in the sub 350 range?
Yeah, there are builders that specialize in that really. I was going to say this. I was going to speak like a local, sorry. That really gnarly, low cost housing, and LGI is one of them. That's their niche. Like if the average price of a home is 400,000 in that area, they're doing it for 300,000, and good for them. But by the way, if you're a loan officer and you work for that, you support LGI. That is one tough. Those are all really tough transactions because you're really trying to squeeze people in, which is admirable when we need more of that. But this is this part about why housing formation has slowed is because the price to income ratio is now high. I mean, let's even make it more understandably, affordability is really strained. And so when people don't think they can afford a house, they're not shopping for a house. That's why we have standing inventory. If we created the environment where people thought they could afford a house, then they would probably get back into the market and we'd have a shortage of units. But here's the thing I want to get to the next slide, David, because this is actually the slide. That's why I was confused when we were first talking about the topic, because this is the slide I really care about. This is another one of those counterintuitive data points. And here's what this data point says, that based on rent to income or a mortgage payment to income, it's cheaper to own a home today than to rent an apartment. Fascinating, because that's not what you're hearing, right? You're hearing like, oh my gosh, the average cost of home ownership is $3,400. The average cost of rent is $2,200. It's so much more expensive to own a home. You should never buy a home, which is complete nonsense. I'm not getting on my horse to talk about that. But then you look at this slide and it says, well, gosh, if you look at rent to income, let's just call it housing to income for rent or for ownership, that it's actually better for owners than it is for renters. Now, here's the problem. I understand this data is really skewed because it doesn't take a universal income. It takes the income of homeowners, right? They take the average PTI for homeowners divided by the average income from homeowners, and then for renters, it takes the average income for rent, the average rent over the average income for renters. So the denominator is not the same in the equation, so you can't really compare it. I totally get it, but if you go back to that chart, the whole point is, look, actually housing DTI for owners isn't significantly different. It is for renters, it's skyrocketing for renters, but for owners, it's pretty stable right now, right? And so there's just another narrative that we can kind of pierce through the noise. Now, there's a lot of complications in this, David. I'm not saying that, but we're just looking at this at a different way. You got any feelings about this?
No, I'd like a little bit of clarification on the graph because I can't see it. It's a little bit small on my screen, but can you describe the lines and what they are for me?
Yeah, the light blue line, David, is the mortgage payment to income, right? And the
Okay.
dark blue line is rent to income. So as you
Okay.
can see, the rent to income, how much I earned, how much I pay, in rent is higher. That ratio is higher for renters than it is for owners.
How do we get here?
Yeah, but David, let me
What
make this
led to
make sense
this?
to you. Yeah, so here's why the confusion is. If McKenna went to go rent an apartment tomorrow, so we take the cost for an apartment, let's say it's $2,000 a month, divided by her monthly earnings, right? And so what that's saying is that DTI for renters, that rent to income, is going up. If you were to go buy a house, we would take your cost of that ownership divided by your income, right? And so for the subset of homeowners, home ownership has been reasonably stabilized over the last few years, right? But for renters, it continues to go up. The problem is the denominator. In McKenna's case, we're using her income, and in your case, we're using your income, and so it's not a universal comparison. I get that, right? It's just another way to look at the data. Really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I
Ron,
clarified that at all.
I feel a little bit dumb on this topic.
Sure. No, it's just interesting. It was a really interesting report by Goldman Sachs. It was a pretty in depth. They had a bunch of other data in there, and those are the ones that caught my eye.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to our rapid fire topics?
Yeah, heck yeah. We've been anything but rapid.
Rapid
so far.
fire. All right. Our goal is 3
Let's
minutes
just go
each,
through the
right? On
Thanksgiving
these.
one. Yeah. We'll be really quick. Here's the key thing here. And we're quoting. Do you guys remember who the article was from? I don't have it in front of me. Our producer McKenna will look it up while I talk about it. But what this whole article was about is that, look, millennials and Gen Zers want to own a home, and they're willing to make sacrifices to do so. And we can go to the next slide, and it talks about the different things they're willing to do. And the point is, yeah, thank you. And I can't read that either. It simply lists the different sacrifices I think that Gen Zers and millennials are willing to make to own a home. And a lot of it is just about learning what to do, how to do it. Yeah, so this is great. Thank you. Aspiring homeowners are delaying kids, career moves, and other major life decisions until they buy a house. Those are the sacrifices, 71% of them. 83% still believe, owning a home is part of the American dream. Of people who do not own a home, 83% have aspirations to buy a home. And then lastly, 56% home ownership represents the American dream more than marriage or having children or retiring by 67. So here's what happens. If you go back to this article, it lists what they did is they surveyed. I'm so sorry, I can't remember who it was. They surveyed, they go, what do you think is the American dream? And then they force ranked the different components, right? And home ownership was towards the top. And there was one thing above it, I can't remember what it was. It's home ownership, like health, having a family, kids, right? And they force ranked it. And then they said, okay, then they came up with, okay, these are the ingredients of what the American dream is. And I think they had 8 things in the ingredients, if I remember right, David, because you and I talked about this. They had like 8 things. And then they said, okay, what's your belief in attaining these things and what's in the way of it? And so what we're just discussing right here is the part about home ownership, but it was a really interesting report. But the point is, contrary to what we think, the younger generations aren't lazy and they're not ambivalent. They really want to own a home. They simply don't know how to. And this is just another report speaking to that. David, any thoughts on that?
I'd like to get McKenna's thoughts on that. McKenna, I think the traditional thought of the American dream is family and a house, and it basically stops there, right? And to be comfortable, right? What is the is that now a dirty word with younger generations? The American dream. What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a dirty word, but I would say it's more of something. I could be wrong, but it's something that seems just a lot more unobtainable now, where it's like, that's, what does that mean? Nobody's going to be able to get that, because I think, most people are focusing on the statistics of, well, I can't buy a house till I'm 40 and this, that, and the other, and the, like the cost of living versus the price of everything, and so that kind of thing. And so I think it's not necessarily a dirty word, but it's something that seems just extremely unobtainable. Also, the article was written by Athena Snow and Coldwell Banker.
Oh yeah, thank you for that.
Of course.
And you know what? It's interesting. I was reading excerpts from a book, and I can't remember. I might make all this up, but it's generally true. But I'm gonna make up the dates and the numbers. I think the book was written in 1954, and I can't remember the title of the book. But the author is the one that actually coined the American dream, and how he defined it. And I believe it was an economist, by the way. How he defined it is the belief that we could be better off than our parents. That was the American dream, pure and simple. And so in the most recent surveys of generations, is American Dream still available to you? The core question is, do you think that you can be better off than your parents? And that's where we're losing hope. Like kids today do not think they're going to be better off than their parents. Now, what this the Cold Banker, they were citing some study. They were like, okay, let's break down the components of the American Dream, and what do you think about it, and what are the barriers, which made it very interesting.
All right, rapid fire number 2, armchair of home purchase applications.
This is really simple and really fun, David. Here's the deal: 25% of applications for new construction for new homes are with an arm, meaning the buyer intends to use an arm. 25% of applications, which is a new high. And here's the thing: I was mentioning to you, David, is so many loan officers don't understand arms, haven't sold arms, because for the longest time we had an inverted yield curve, like for 14 years. Inverted yield curve means the 30-year fix was cheaper than an arm. So why would you sell an arm? Like you don't even understand an arm. Like it makes no sense. But in order to make houses more affordable, builders are selling arms, right? Because they have a lower percentage rate. As a matter of fact, it's about 80 basis points cheaper right now, today's pricing. So if let's say your interest rate 6.25, well, an arm's going to be somewhere around, somewhere around 5.5, 5 3/8, significantly lower, right? And that's just called spread. That's the spread between a 30-year fix, the long arm, the long side of the curve, and the short side of the curve, right? And so now it's getting cheaper to use arms. And so home buyers at new construction are using arms 25% of the time. And what the thing is, we need to understand is that actually shows a healthy market. That's what it should be. An inverted yield curve is an unhealthy market. And if you go back 30 years in this business, all you did was arms, right? I mean, arms are like 70%, 80%. Even into the early 2000s, arms is what we did. Arms is how you drove business. There's such great opportunity once you understand them and understand how to consult people to them, advise them, how to use them. It's such a wonderful tool, and it's good to see that we're starting to get a healthy interest rate market where we have a spread between 30-year fix and short-term interest rates. And what's so funny is many of us think that the bond market is ailing because our rates are so high. But the solution it's not on the long end of the curve, it's the short end of the curve. And so while the Fed may keep cutting, the overnight cost of funds rates, I don't think 30-year fixed rates are going to come down. And I think you're going to see the percentage of arms going up. David, what do you think about that?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ron. Arms kind of got a bad name for themselves after the Great Recession, right? After 2008-9. I think a lot of people blamed it on arms, but that wasn't exactly true. Is that right?
Yeah, you're kind of right. There were a lot of toxic features to arms that made them horrific, right? And part of it was, David, let's say that I qualified you on an arm, and a lot of arms had a teaser rate, like a 2-year teaser rate. So let's say interest rates are at the market rate's at 6%, and you're on a 2-year arm and you're getting 3%, and I qualified you on the 3%. Great. Well, what happens in 2 years when your payment goes up to the 6%? What the heck happens, right? You're stuck. And if you couldn't afford it today, you probably can't afford it in 24 months. So that was a problem. And then because we knew you wanted to get the heck out of that onerous arm once it converted, because it converted to an above market rate at that point, we do this prepayment penalty saying you can't get out of your arm for 5 years. Like, all right, you win the first 2 years, and then we screw you the next. Let's say it was a 5-1 arm. We're going to screw you the next 3 years, and we're going to lock you in. So sorry, And so there's a lot of features that were bad about arms. I can keep going on. There's other features like neg-am and other things. Interest only was another problem. You do it interest only during the fixed rate period, and then it would convert not only to the higher rate, but fully amortized. So you might go from a $1,500 payment to like a $3,500 payment, and you're like, what the heck? What are you doing? And so there's a lot of toxic features that don't exist today in the way that we do arms. And for example, we qualify people now at the fully amortized rate. For one, that's the first thing, right?
And then is that why a lot of loan officers try? Sorry, Ron.
No, go ahead, please.
Is that why a lot of loan officers try to stay away from them, or aren't fully educated, or just kind of is that why? Because of the black sheep, the history of them?
No, it's a really good question, David. But the problem is, or has been, and it's going to change, which is the good news, is that arms are really the product of banks and credit unions, people that can loan their own money. And think of it this way, David: if I can go to the Fed and borrow money at 0.25%, and I can lend it to you at 3%, I love that all day, right? But if I'm an IMB and I have to go out into the marketplace to find that money, I can't compete at all. I can't even come close to competing. And so loan officers don't like that because they know it's a bank product or a credit union product. But that's only been the case the last 2 decades or decade and a half. Once that those, those spreads happen between long and short-term rates, that money, that liquidity is going to come back to the market so anybody can compete. But the fact that I couldn't compete would be why I steer you away. Like, you don't want to arm, because if you want to arm, you're going to have to go to a credit union, or you're going to have to go to Bank of America or someplace. The second reason, one of the challenges with arms, especially inverted, well, of course, remember that they're more expensive than 30-year fixed, but there's very little what's called overage in an arm, right? So the overage, or there's very little spacing. So let's say on a 30-year fix, let's say you want 6% mortgage. That's what par is. Meaning a par doesn't cost you anything. I'm not making any extra money. But at 6.25, right, I might make an extra point, right? So I can sell you 6.25 and I get premium pricing, which we can apply to closing costs or whatever we want to do, right? Well, that premium pricing doesn't really exist in arms, because investors don't love that product, and nor do servicers, because they think it's going to run off faster. And then it gets to the point, the servicing values on an arm have a lot less value because the servicers don't think that they're going to have them as long. There's all sorts of economics into it that make it very hard for an IMB loan officer, especially when their rates are inverted, or if they're the margin's very thin. But that's the thing I'm going to tell you, that's all about to change. And you're going to see arms go mainstream, and I think they're going to be done responsibly. You're not going to get all these toxic features, and I think it's going to be okay.
All right, we're double the length. These are supposed to be rapid fire. Let's talk about getting stoned.
Yeah, that's right. And we're gonna need to get McKenna in on this. But this, David, I'm an old dude. I'm a conservative dude. I have little clue what's going on in the world. So I was surprised to see that Wall Street Journal talk about how everybody's getting stoned at Thanksgiving. I'm like, wow, Wall Street Journal, what are you doing? And then the next day, Bloomberg had a lead article on how everybody's stoned. I'm like, what? And so what happens is they've called it the cousin walk. That is, like, your family get together, and these two cousins that haven't seen each other in a year, they're like, hey, let's go walk down to the park, and we'll be back in a half hour. This gets fresh air. And they go get stoned, right? And but the thing about this whole getting stoned thing is it's not, now it's mainstream. Like today, every generation is, getting stoned at Thanksgiving. It's incredible. And in fact, you can get whole cookbooks on how to cook food with THC. Like you might have gravy with THC and gravy without it, or stuffing with it, or stuffing without it, or turkey with it, turkey without it, right? And then you might have gummies or whatever on the table, and then people are drinking THC mineral water, right? And like, it's grandma and it's mom and it's a girl, and so you no longer have to go walk around the block for the cousin walk because everybody's getting stoned. In fact, and this will tell you how just out of it I am. Both articles cited that today is the second highest selling day of marijuana products at marijuana dispensaries. The second highest. Now, tell you how dumb I am. I'm like, oh, I wonder what the number one day is, right? Like, I have no idea what the number one day is, right? And of course, it's 420, which I don't, but everybody, and you know what the thing is? And so once again, this is Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. This isn't like, Teen Vogue or whatever the hell. This is like two giant mainstream newspapers, right? And they're like, and you know what? People actually get along a little better. It's like, it's actually improving the environment. It's like dinner's better. What do you guys think?
Oh,
Now, I don't know what
McKenna-
that dig was about,
McKenna brought-
Ron. Because you said, oh man, we're really going to have McKenna on for this topic. I don't know what that dig was for, but appreciate
It's not
it.
a dig. I'm hoping you give us insights. Like, I don't know.
But whenever I was prepping for today, I got very excited whenever I saw that this was a topic. And before I read that you were going to mention the cousin walk, I was like, oh yeah, the cousin walk.
Yeah, and you're pulling a Bill Clinton on us. Earlier today, when we were looking at our content, you did Bill Clinton fully. You're like, oh yeah, I've been on the cousin walk, but
And no. I have been a part. I don't have any problems with it. Like, people can have fun, they can do their thing. It's just not my thing. But, I have FOMO. Whenever people go on a walk, I want to go on a walk. And so I've been on a few cousin walks.
I don't know. That doesn't seem like a lot of water. I have FOMO of people walking around the block, so I have to go with them.
So tomorrow,
My cousins.
the lesson is, if when you've got family over at your house, it's Thanksgiving Day, and the turkey just needs another hour before it's done. If someone says that they're going for a walk, they're going to get high. So that's the
Yeah.
point of this.
Well, no, Dave, I don't care about that. I'm paying attention to what people bring. What are you talking about? Like, what's in that gravy? Why you bring that gravy? What's in that pea salad? I don't trust you. And what's that mineral water? Do you know what they're called, McKenna? I know David does it. Maybe David does. But like, there's all these
No.
like sparkling waters packed with TPC that are, by the way, the sales are
Oh, like
skyrocketing.
seltzers.
Yeah,
Yeah, like seltzers.
yeah,
I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about, but I don't know what they're called.
yeah. Anyway, so I just can't believe how mainstream it is. And not only that, but the funniest part was, and dinners are better now. Uncle Jeb's stories no longer sound so stupid. They're kind of interesting.
Gotta make sure everybody's mellowed out for the holidays. Don't you have family members that you don't get along with?
Yeah, I can actually tolerate Aunt June now. I mean, what the hell? She's gone through a lot.
All right, let's wrap up with our last rapid fire, where we talk about your safe Thanksgiving guide.
Well, honestly, David, I was a fan of just only having this as our topic, just doing a Thanksgiving show. So the Safe Thanksgiving Guide, there's the USDA has a great website on how to cook a turkey and how to do it safely. And the first challenge is, how do you defrost it? And so there's 3 ways you can defrost it, and it talks about how to defrost it and how not to do bacteria all over the place. But the better part is, so on the website, they have 2 calculators, a thawing calculator, which is too late for you guys to use, the thawing calculator. And you just go in there and you put in, hey, how am I going to thaw it? How much does it weigh? How long will it take? So I did mine a week ago. I went there. I have a 28-pound turkey. I said, okay, what's the best way? It said, you got to do it in the refrigerator, and it's X amount of days per every 5 pounds or something. And it told me it's going to be 7 days. And so I put the dang bird in the refrigerator 7 days ago. But these are the ways you can do it. They tell you how to do it, in a safe way. And then they had another calculator there, which was how long to cook it. This still could be helpful, this part. How long you cook it. It depends on whether it has dressing or not. That's the thawing calculator. There's a cooking calculator, asks a couple questions, and stuffed, unstuffed, cooking method, and weight. By the way, deep oil frying is on there. Just super, super helpful, right? And so I thought that was really good. But David, we don't care. That's too late. People can't. If your turkey's not thawed now, you know what it is. Go to Cracker Barrel. But now, David, what are you guys doing for Thanksgiving?
It's going to be minimal. We have a family coming over, 5 of them. We've done Thanksgiving now with them probably 5 or 6 times over the last dozen years or so. So I'll be air frying my turkey.
Nice.
And I've got one
Air
of those
frying.
large
Yeah.
ones that fit the entire turkey on propane. So I'll be brining it pretty much right after we get off this podcast. I'll be brining it, and then I'll be injecting it tomorrow, and then dousing it with some kind of, I think probably a meat church whatever seasoning. I couldn't think of the word seasoning. I was like, oh, okay, it's getting late. But yeah, it'll be quiet. So family and friends and a good turkey. You sent me your menu earlier,
Yeah.
and I just looked at it maybe 30 minutes before we got on this podcast, maybe 45 minutes. My jaw dropped. It hit the floor when I saw everything that you have on it. So why don't you tell us?
Well, no, let me ask you, do you guys have any side dishes or traditions? Everybody does. I love asking this question. Like, anything unique?
No, I don't think we do. I am, of course, I'm not naturally born U.S. citizen, and so I had no idea about Thanksgiving until I was in my late teens or my mid-teens. So we never had those unique traditions from my family because I didn't grow up here. And traditions that Kelly has from her family, it's nothing unique. The typical stereotypical go around the table, say what you're thankful for, but no, nothing unique. You?
Yeah, yeah, interesting. And something I don't like turkey. I rarely have any. For me, it's all about the side dishes because a lot of times you don't necessarily get all
Mm.
those side dishes. But McKenna, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
When do you see yourself hosting Thanksgiving for you or you and your family unit or for the entire family?
That's a great question. Hopefully never. I don't like I don't like cooking. I was just thinking it would be nice to be in a house that's not hosting
Yeah,
because I
it's so
usually help
fun.
with the prep and the cook and everything like that. I'm like, man, that's just so much work.
Yeah. Yeah, David. So Thanksgiving was always my dad's holiday, and he hosted Thanksgiving for well over 60 years at his house. And McKenna, I was his sous chef for those 60 years, for most part. And so it's so interesting because now we have kids and grandkids that have their own families, and they're starting to branch out. As a matter of fact, in San Diego, for the first time, somebody in my family is going to host Thanksgiving in San Diego. That's not my dad or at my parents' house. And that's such a interesting transition, and it's such a neat transition. And I was talking to my son Vincent about this. I'm sure he'll watch this podcast, and he's like, hey, when do you think I'll be able to host Thanksgiving? I'm like, now, like now, like I've done this 60 years. It's your turn. It's whenever
Yeah.
you want. We're ready. Like we're not preserving it. We're ready. And it'd be, to me, McKenna, there'd be no greater joy than for me to go to somebody's Thanksgiving house and I could be the old crazy uncle in the corner drinking bourbon, and people are bringing me my plate of food, and I just gotta show up, and then leave. I mean, like, I'm like, let's pass the torch. Like,
My brother
you
just
know what I mean?
commented that he can't wait to come to my house for Thanksgiving one year.
Yeah. Well,
He's watching
I, I
live.
would,
Yep. Yes,
I
he
would, I would
is.
love to see that. That'd be awesome. But it's like a family tradition. You get to start create. That's the neatest thing to watch as you get older. Is this new family formation and creating new traditions and how much what bridges over to the new generation, and what's totally different new and how do you do it? Because one thing is like I tell our son, I tell whoever asks me, um, start with a potluck. Like okay, I'll make the turkey and everybody brings something, and now you got Thanksgiving. That's spectacular, easy enough. It doesn't have to be backbreaking, especially if you're starting out. You don't really have a great kitchen and you don't have all the stuff, right? Like, that's how you start. Now, David, I've been doing this for a long time, so I have a somewhat developed menu. And the thing I try to do for people, the thing that Belinda and I try to do for people come to our house is we try to make it look like it was effortless, like it just magically appeared and there's not a whole lot of cleanup and it's like there's no stress. That's what we try to achieve, which has taken a whole lot of years of practice. Now, Belinda has vetoed paper plates, which I'm for. I'm like, no cleaning, throw in the trash can. They make perfectly good paper plates of every size. David, you've been to my house. I like serving food on paper plates. But she wants to sit down, which is great. And it's fun. It's fun. And it's fun. I love to listen to what people really like eating and not eating. It's a good time.
Yeah. If there's one thing I know about you, Ron, it is that you and Belinda are both you know what? It's Thanksgiving tomorrow. I'm gonna say what I'm thankful for, Ron. I'm thankful for you and Belinda because we've spent many
Uh,
times now together in each other's homes, and you and Belinda go over and above and over the top with you are probably the best hosts
oh
that
my gosh.
I know. No, I'm serious.
Uh,
I wasn't planning on saying this, but you guys are over the top, and you you've just got a huge hearts. So,
yeah.
you know what? This Thanksgiving, I'm thankful for the Stowers family, and you guys are incredible.
Well, it's nice of you to say that, especially since you're hosting us in 2 days or 3 days. So thank you for letting us in your home on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, yeah. All right, should we end it there? Oh no, we've got one more. We've got our news section, and we'll end it here. I think we're way over in time this week. Not that we're restricted or whatever, it's the internet. We can go however long we want, but we're way over how long we plan to go. But we've got one last section, and it's the AI prompt of the week. So let's take a look at this one.
Yeah.
Ron, lead the
David,
way.
I love it.
Brutally
I do. I
honest
love this prompt.
advisor.
Are we going to bring it up, McKenna?
Yeah.
Okay. I know you guys can't see this, but here's what this says. This is a prompt, and then you're trying to prompt your AI tool to give you brutally honest feedback on how you're doing. And I don't know if you've ever done this. David, have you done this?
Yes.
So it is incredible. And then the prompts tell you how to tell it to be brutally honest, because it wants to please you. That's the algorithm. And so you have to pierce through that natural pleasing to go, no, listen, talk to me like this is who I am. Don't worry about my comfort. Don't worry about my emotions. Here's what's more important, that I get better. Here's what's more important is that I genuinely want to get better. And so you have to call it out. You have to just go to the edge, right? I've done this before, and it scared the hell out of me. Like I don't know if I can take the answer. Matter of fact, David, I'll tell you, I've chronicled this Thanksgiving. I have about 20 different dishes. I put my recipes into ChatGPT, and then we improved the recipes. We did timelines. We did the whole event planning. And I said, look, ChatGPT, as a gift to my guests, I want to create a Thanksgiving book with how to hit the easy button, what are techniques, here's recipes, here's a hard thing, here's what to learn and all this kind of stuff, right? And it's really great. It's giant. I should show it to you. It's really good, right? But at the end, I'm going to go, ChatGPT, do you think I'm a good cook? But I probably don't. I don't have the confidence to ask it. If I get, said, be brutally honest. What do you think about my cooking skills? I'd be worried about what it say.
I forget what I've asked Chat to be brutally honest with me about. I don't remember, but I do remember feeling slightly uncomfortable when I asked it to do that. So yeah, there you go.
David, when we were working on our personal codes with Dave Savage, and I had, I put my personal code into ChatGPT, and I said, hey, and I give it this, be brutally honest, tell me the truth, the whole deal. I go, am I living my code? Like, I was seriously nervous while I was waiting for it. Took like 3 minutes to respond. I'm like, that's probably the one of the more same thing. Like, you can do with all your health. You put all your health. You put all your health hopefully into a thread or to a GPT or whatever it happens to be. And am I living the healthiest life I could? What could I do better? Or what am I really not walking my path on? You're like, oh, shut up. What are you talking about? Chicken fried steak is a health food. Yeah.
Sure, you can do one more beer.
Yeah, no beer? You're fired. Like, cancel the subscription. What are you talking about, you fool? You're no doctor. But it's weird how you can get, people get more vulnerable with their AI tool than they do with people close to them,
Mm-hmm.
But use that prompt. Check it out. The prompt that teaches you how to pierce through the algorithm satisfying you to give you actually really good feedback on whatever you do. And if you could analyze.
And if you're still listening, if you want any of the images that we've shared or the prompt or any of that stuff, just comment on any of our social channels. We'll send you that over. We'll send it to you. So, hey, if you've been watching this whole time, I doubt it, but we appreciate it. We appreciate you following along. These two old crazy guys, just bantering and ranting about random stuff, but hey, follow us on YouTube primarily. Subscribe to our channel. We'd appreciate it. And cheers with that, Ron. Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy Thanksgiving to you. Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining.